Okay, welcome to the fourth video in our Python tutorial. And we're going to be looking at something called for loops in this tutorial. So we're on, if you're following along in the guide, we're on page 10 of the guide. So you'll recall in our last video, we introduced the concept of creating a function. So we created this function, my degrees to radians, that converted an angle in degrees, an input, angle in degrees, and we outputted or we returned an angle in radians, okay? And so one thing that we pointed out is that you can do this using your function that you created. You can convert an angle in degrees to the angle in radians, or you can use this numpy command deg to rad, np.deg to rad, to convert from degrees to radians. And one advantage of this deg to rad version is that you can convert multiple angles all at once, okay? So what we want to do in this lab is upgrade our function or use something called for loops to basically do the same thing. Okay, so we want to write a for loop so that we can also use our function that we've defined, my deg to rad, my degrees to radians, to convert multiple angles all at once. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to leave this file as it is, and we're just going to add to it at the end here. Right, so A, B, and C, we can leave those as they are. The first thing I would like to say is that a for loop is basically a way to do something multiple times, one after one another. Perhaps just changing one small thing each time. And so in our case, we're going to do the same thing multiple times. We're going to convert an angle from degrees to radians multiple times. The one small thing we're going to change between each of these loops, or each loop in this for loop, is we're going to change the angle that we're converting, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new array or a new list, which I'm going to call D, and I'm going to actually just steal these numbers from up here. Okay, so now I have this array or this list called D, and it's full of these angles, 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, and 180. So D is a list of all these angles. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to, every single angle in this D list, or this D array, I want to send that angle into my function, my degrees to radians, okay? So how we're going to do that is we're going to create a new list or a new array, which I'm going to call E. And if I write E like this, E equals these square brackets here, that just gives me an empty list. So D here is a list full of angles. E at the moment is an empty list. We're going to fill E with these angles and radians, okay? Okay. So to define a for loop, I quite simply write for space, and now I'm going to put a placeholder name for the angles I'm going to pass to it. So I'm going to write dangle or d-angle. So this is basically, d-angle is going to change every iteration of the loop. It's going to start at 0, then be 20, then be 40, all the way up to 180. Okay? So d-angle is going to change every time. So for d-angle in d colon, okay, so this for loop is saying for every angle, basically, every angle, and we're going to call those individually d-angle, in this array D, we're going to do something, okay? So this list or this array D, for every angle in there. You'll notice again, if I press enter, that I have this indentation. So that defines that I'm still within this for loop. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write this thing e.append. Okay, so remember E was this empty list. If I write e.append, it means take whatever's in E right now, and we're going to add one thing to it. Okay, so append is just add one thing to this list E. Okay. So what am I going to add to this list E? Well, I better put that in brackets. Okay, so now in these brackets, I'm going to add my angle in radians. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to convert the angle to radians. And remember, one way we can do that is using the function my_deg_to_rad that we defined above. Okay, and so I'm going to pass into that function the value of the angle. Okay, and also, of course, I should go back. We're going to print out the values of E. So let's just take a look at what we've done here really quickly. We created this list, or this array, we call that an array, D, full of these angles and degrees, okay? We then created an empty array, which we're calling E. Okay, so at the start it's empty, so if we move down here, it's empty. Then for every angle, or every entry into this array D, so every angle 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, 180, we're going to send that angle, D angle, to this function my_degrees to radians, which we defined, and we remember that converts whatever you give it from a degree to a radian. And so this part of the code converts that angle to radians, and then we're going to append that value in radians to this list E, okay? And so that's going to loop through, it's going to perform this action. That for loop is going to perform this action for every angle, every D angle in D. So every one of these values. And then hopefully, if that's worked, we should print out the E, which is the list of angles and radians. So let's save that and then see what happens. Okay, good. This is looking good. So one thing we have is we have an A and our B, which were, remember, the radians of 90 degrees using my_degrees to radian function that we defined. B was the same thing, but using the NumPy version of degrees to radian. C was converting multiple angles at once using the Python version, degrees to radians. And now E is our version of iterating over multiple angles and using our function my_degrees to radians. And you can see that this list C is exactly the same as this list E, apart from, well, there's a few extra decimal places in this list E. The values are actually the same. So if you look at the first one, 0, second one, 3.149, sorry, 0.349, 0.349 there, 0.698, 0.698, and so on. So this for loop seems to have succeeded. We've succeeded in taking all the angles in this list, passing it to our function my_degrees to radian, and appending it or adding it into this list E, which initially is empty. Okay, so that's one way that a for loop works. Okay. So this is a really useful way if you have a lot of things that you need to, let's say a lot of angles that you need to convert. This is a really efficient way of doing this all in a really short piece of code, right? You can imagine that I can add 1,000 different numbers into this list D, and the code to convert those to radians actually wouldn't change at all. So let's just test that, shall we? So let's add a few more numbers in here. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So I mean, I can add as many as I want. If I save that and run that again, you can see without changing the loop at all, we loop through every value in D, even these ones that we've added here, and we get these extra outputs. So a for loop is a very efficient way to perform the same action multiple times. Okay, so my suggestion would be to also give this a try yourself, perhaps going the other way. So perhaps taking a list of angles and radians and converting them to degrees using a for loop. So I hope that you will try that. But before we move on from for loops to something else, I just wanted to point out there's also a different way to use for loops that is often seen. So we'll just have a quick look at that now. So I might just delete these extra entries I put into our list D. Okay, and I'll create another empty list F. So in the same way I created an empty list here called E. And what I'm going to do is a for loop, but write this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to write for I in range, and I'll explain what this all means shortly, in range 0, len D. Now I'll put my colon at the end there. So what this line is saying is that we're going to create a number I, which starts at 0, does something, then it adds 1, so then it becomes 1, then it becomes 2, all the way through to something called len D. So len D is the length of D, okay? So one thing to know about Python is that the numbers in an array start from, or let's say the positions in an array or a list start from 0. So this is position 0, this is position 1, this is position 2, position 3, position 4, position 5, and finally position 6. Even though there's 7 numbers in there, right? Position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is why we have to start from 0 here, because position 0 in this case is 0 degrees. Len D in this case is going to be 6. Okay, so we're changing this number I from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to append into that empty list F my dig to rad. Okay, and I'm going to write something first. Okay, and perhaps I'll just print this out too, just while I'm here. And remember, I must get back to the flat with the wall. Okay, so what have we done here? We've created this new number called I, which changes starting at 0, goes all the way to the length of D, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Into this empty list we've created, we're going to append the value that we get back from this my degree to radians, okay? So we have to send an angle to my degree to radians, and the angle we're sending in this particular case is this DIII. And so if I write D, which is this list here, and in square brackets I write III, well, III starts at 0, so D0, D in the square bracket 0, gives me the first entry, or the zeroth entry. When III then becomes 1, I get D in these square brackets 1, so I look at the first, the entry in position 1 of list D, and that is 20. So that will send 20 and convert it to radians. And this continues like so, and hopefully if we save and run that, well, E and F are exactly the same lists, right? These are exactly the same lists. Maybe I'll clear that and just run it one more time to clarify that. So what we've done is I've just shown you 2 ways to perform for loop iterations in Python. So this first way just looks at every entry in D for the angle or the D angle in D. and uses that d angle as the variable. The second way iterates over every position in d, so position 0 through to position 6, and sends to this function we created the value of list d in position I, where I goes from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I know that's probably quite a lot to absorb, so we'll end this there, but I do hope you'll try to iterate a radian to your function my radians to degrees, which you should have completed last time in the last video. I hope you try to do the same thing that we did with degrees to radians. I hope you try and go the other way using both these types of loops. Okay, thank you.